3 coaches, including Dan Quinn, are approaching their first-year rookie quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So how Eberflus has prepared for Caleb Williams, what they're doing in OTAs, what Mayo is doing for Drake May, and what Quinn is doing with Jaden Daniels in Washington. And you can give me your impressions. So what Quinn and Kingsbury are prioritizing is straight-out volume, reps. They're running what they call 2-spot practices, which means he's got Marcus Mariota and Jaden Daniels on 2 fields, 2 defenses, and at the exact same time, they run the same play on both sides. So the same defensive call, same offensive call, and they're just doing it that way so that they get more reps instead of alternating. Because in typical camps, the quarterbacks would alternate. So Mariota would get a rep, and boom, then Jaden Daniels gets his rep.
Remember I said they noticed that they were using both fields, whereas in previous time they would mostly use one field.
And I think he said something like they might even flip a coin to see who gets the first team, but he wants them working with different players. So it wouldn't just be Mariota works with McLaurin. Because remember last year, I think it was, we heard, or maybe it was a couple years ago, that Heineke had never thrown the ball to McLaurin until he got into a game.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It might not have been Heineke. It might have been
Howell.
Yeah, I think it was Sam Howell.
Yeah.
But Sam Howell had never thrown to McLaurin. It was like he's been there the whole season.
Right.
But I guess that's kind of standard for a lot of quarterbacks. A couple other interesting things there was so they got Jaden getting a bunch of reps with these 2-spot practices.
They're not messing around.
They also basically said Quinn acknowledged that it was an early tell signing Mariota that they were leaning towards Jaden Daniels. But they are constructing an offense based on his skill set.
Well, they have to, yeah.
And here's the sentence here. It says, the March signing of the mobile Mariota was an early tell that the Commanders were leaning heavy toward taking the reigning Heisman winner. Quinn said 100%. So
we kind of assumed that too, didn't we?
We did, but then we tried to talk ourselves out of it when they
we didn't
said it
really
wasn't.
know. Yeah.
So they deny everything. And you go, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just because he has the relationship with Brian Johnson.
Good job by them trying to throw everybody off the scent as to where they were going.
And I guess through the first 3 practices, one of Quinn's takeaways about Jaden Daniels, and this is encouraging, is that he's a hard worker. And as silly as it is, he was impressed by the studying the playbook on the airplane.
Yeah, he basically said, look, he could have been sleeping. He could have been doing anything else, but he had his nose in the playbook. He was learning the hand signals.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's encouraging.
I think,
pick a guy number 2.
I think that's what like his coaches said. That's what Herm Edwards said. Like the guy just loves football.
Right.
You know, loves to study. He's going to be one of those guys that's like the first in, last out. It's just how he is.
So it seems like they tested him in a way. It says so early on the first day, he put Daniels out there with the first team so they could see for themselves that he'd already gained a level of command with the offense, a sign from the rookie to his older teammates just how serious he'd taken the 2.5 weeks since being drafted. And I guess he had command of the offense.
Yeah, I don't know. These guys, we don't give them enough credit for how much information they absorb.
I couldn't imagine.
No, and how smart they are. All these guys, man. Hats off to them.
It's interesting. I put up a picture of Jaden Daniels in the uniform for the first time. The Commanders actually put it out, and I put it on our Instagram page. Follow us, Sports Junkies Radio, on our Facebook page. It's also on our Twitter, @JunksRadio on Twitter. People are scared about the frame.
Oh, I know, my buddy.
People are terrified about the frame. I mean, I can go through some of the comments. If you haven't seen the picture,
Here's the
Sports
picture.
Junkies Radio on Instagram.
He just, his arms look skinny, you know. My buddy Vinny said he looks like, eat a cheeseburger
But that's
already.
just the way he's built.
That's just how he's built. I
Right.
know. And I'm sure he'll get thicker. And I'm sure he's been
They'll
lifting.
get him in the weight room. They'll get him the protein
They'll
shakes.
They'll get him built up as well as he
They'll
can.
add 10 or 15 pounds of muscle to him. I'm not that worried about his frame.
Here's a couple comments. He's not going to last. Stick figure. Here's one. Offensive Rookie of the Year. And some people just hate the uniform. the colors.
I don't mind it. They're close enough for me. They're close enough. They're definitely
It's
not
close enough proximity.
They're close enough.
He does look lean in this one.
Is this
seen
the same
like
pick?
Same pick.
Yeah.
It's the
But
one
even
the
if he was
Commanders
big, any
released.
quarterback can get hurt. I mean, just look at all the bigger quarterbacks who get hurt too. I mean,
No, of course. Anybody
quarterbacks
can
get hurt.
But if you're Spindlier, you can't deny it's a little more likely that you'll get hurt
He's just
than
gotta
a
be-
stockier guy.
He's just got to be good at avoiding hits.
If you want to chime in,
Getting out of
800
bounds.
He's got to be
sliding.
smart. He's got to be
Yeah.
smart.
800-636-1067. You want to call us in the MGM National Harbor listener lines. Your first impression. So there's the first impression of how he looks in the uniform. That's one thing. A lot of people think he's slight. Does it get you nervous? A lot of people definitely nervous if you look at the comments on social media. The other thing is just what you're hearing about him. Now, I looked at what Eberflus said about Caleb Williams in the article and what Mayo said about May. They're all going to be positive. They just drafted a guy in the top three, all these teams, and none of these guys are going to come in there like a total donk. I mean, maybe Johnny Manziel did. I don't know. But probably even Johnny Manziel, when you look back at what coaches said in the first 3 days after their first OTAs, was probably positive.
What, I listened to Kimes' podcast, which I love. I recommend everybody listen to it, even though it has nothing to do with us. I listened to it this morning, and he had Greg Cosell on. And, Cosell's whole deal is that he spends like 80 hours a week watching film. And he said something that was kind of counter to what the narrative is on Jaden. He's very pro Jaden. Is that he saw progression. Obviously, he said he had a great, actually, freshman year at Arizona State. Showed a lot of promise. And then just the growth from, even from his previous season at LSU to his final season. But he said one of the areas where he grew was throwing over the middle, in between the hashes, where people said... And he didn't say this, but I just know other people have said he has a difficult time throwing over the middle. The middle of the field's tighter, especially at the NFL, right? The hashes are closer. But he said he grew a lot and did that in college. So he saw that in his last year.
It's interesting how people will look at film, and I respect
And
Cosell,
they see it differently.
And they do see it differently because Belichick was one, I think, during the draft that talked about that he needs to work on certain things.
Well, maybe Bill hasn't seen as many of the
other
games.
thing is, statistically, I know
as Greg.
Zach Kruger did a deep dive into a couple things, the pressure to sack ratio, but also the routes. I think it was from Zach Kruger, the routes that they run at LSU, and it was a ton of go routes. So when you have great receivers on the outside, why wouldn't you throw to the outside?
We have a burner who goes 6, and where did Thomas Jr. go? 20th?
Yeah.
The Jaguars, somewhere in that range?
Right, 2 first rounders.
Yeah, you're going to put the ball up for grabs for
but
those
everything
guys.
is going to get tougher in the NFL.
Absolutely.
Every single thing. Every single aspect of the game for a quarterback is going to get tougher.
For sure, but his best attribute is, in my opinion, is those 2 years playing in the toughest league in college.
That certainly helps.
So he played in the toughest league he could possibly play in.
And I think
and excel.
But think about it. Bryce Young played 3 years in that league, won a Heisman, had 47 touchdowns and 5 picks the year he won the Heisman.
But the X factor there is...
And he had NFL receivers.
He's also tiny.
True, but my point is, look how much difficult it is at the NFL level. Yeah.
Right, but I think that has to do with, because there's so many factors. You have to have your talent, your base set, but then you have to have coaching.
Overall talent around you.
Talent around you, but also coaching, fit.
100%.
Scheme.
Correct.
Hopefully, he fits with what Kingsbury likes to do.
Right.
it seems like they were very intentional with the free agency move of getting Mariota, and very intentional of Kingsbury, his offense, to Jaden Daniels. Right. But here's what I think is the most encouraging.
The one thing about Kingsbury is when he was at Texas Tech, he ran the
air raid.
He ran the air raid. So spread out the receivers, sometimes 5 receivers, didn't like to run. But when he got to Arizona, he balanced it out more. So don't expect him to air it out like the enemy was. There's going to be a balance.
No, that's not going to happen.
Cosell said. There has to be.
There will be a balance.
And especially as you get closer, obviously, to the end zones, when you can't vertically stretch, you have to horizontally spread.
Yeah, they're not going to do that to Daniels and force him to throw 35, 40 times.
Here's what I think, though, is the most encouraging thing. You never know what's inside a guy, and you still don't know what's inside a guy when it comes to work ethic, and those are the things we didn't know. We knew he put up great numbers in college. But what Quinn said, the quote, which Cakes was talking about, he says he loves football. So, like, all right, Dan, what does that mean? I'm talking about wanting to just put in the extra time. You can tell how important it is to get it right and go for it. So I learned how much he loves it. Like, it's evident by how hard somebody's going for it. I knew he was an excellent competitor. Everybody said that. But to see him take his work and communicate and already establish some leadership in the way he carries himself and works, that was cool to see.
Yeah, I think
So
the
that's
last
just
thing you
after
worry
3
about
days.
for Jaden Daniels is his work ethic. I think he's already proven that he's got that. He's got
And
plenty
I actually
of it.
think he's a humble guy, too.
Yeah.
I like everything about him so far.
Right.
Right.
Having not played down yet
Right.
of even preseason football.